Welcome back to Root Double, as we review the last of our bad endings. The first one we got in Chapter 1. Let's say... see, reviewing what we've led us up to this choice. It's guarded around Salio. Afraid of her trying to change my current life. This home was a place of peace. Gain duty points. Why, I scrolled really far back up in this log. She finally found a role for herself. Yeah, here we go. Thing she always wanted, Why do you sound like you've known Sally from somewhere before? Because I'm you, Natsuhiko. Let's see. I can tell. Oh, we have our answer now, so let's go with the bad answer.
どうして
だろうね。でもサリュちゃんはきっとヒコリンの味方だと思うよ。
急にそんなこと言われても、おいそれとは受け入れられないよ。
どうしても？
だって昨日今日会ったばかりの子だぞ。味方とか言われたって。悪意も敵意もないなんて、それも根拠のない話じゃないか。
Natsuhiko was resisting the change
ねえヒコリ
in
ン、
his own head.
どうしてもそう思ってしまうの
Natsuhiko averted his eyes from Yuri's pointed stare.
サリュがこの家に踏み込んでこなかったら、ここまで意固地にはならないさ。僕はユーリが心配なだけなんだ。もしサリュがユーリに何か悪い影響を与えたらと思うと。
だから受け入れられない。
Natsuhiko's silence brought a downcast expression to Yuri's face.
ごめんね、ヒコリン。そんなに心配かけて。だけどお願い。少しだけでいいから、他の人にも心を開いて。
努力はしてるよ。
今のままじゃ足りないの。もっと心を開かなきゃ。ヒコリン自身が苦しむことになると思う。
え？どうしてそんなことを？
だってヒコリンは今サリュちゃんたちと力を合わせなければ命を落としてしまうような状況にいるんだもの。
The moment Yuri said that, scenery changed before Natsuhiko's very eyes. It's always a bad sign. You can do it all over again. When Natsuhiko came back to his senses, he found himself standing in front of a shut gate. Beside him were Yuri, Mashino, and Salio.
ここは？
Girls responded to Natsuhiko's confusion.
どうしたの、夏彦？ここはラボだよ。火災が起きているラボ。ぼーっとしている時間はない。炎が迫っている。
もうって。
Finally realized what was going on when he heard that word. That's right, I was trying to get out of Labo. So he strained himself to try and wrench the jammed door open. Fires were raging behind them, gradually encroaching.
悪い。一瞬意識が飛んでいた。
大丈夫なの、夏彦？やっぱり私も手伝うよ。
すまない。頼む。
He tried once more to pry open the door. Before them, Natsuhiko, Mashino, Salio, and Yuri tried their best to pry open the gate. But it wouldn't open. No matter how much force they applied, the door wouldn't budge.
くそ。なんで。
まずいよ、夏彦。炎が。
Turning his head back in shock, Natsuhiko realized just how close the flames had gotten. Smoke billowed out at an alarming rate, polluting the clean air. First to start coughing was Salio.
みんな頑張れ。このゲートを開ければ。
Finally, even Natsuhiko succumbed to smoke inhalation. Totally not a physical metaphor for Natsuhiko opening his heart. Natsuhiko fell to his knees, coughing violently. Marshall, Salio, and everyone else appeared to have trouble breathing due to the smoke. Tears spilled out uncontrollably, blurring their vision. This is bad. Natsuhiko held his breath and tried to open the gate once more. Even so, it didn't open. The gate was unyielding. Eventually, the girl's coughing grew weaker. Natsuhiko couldn't hold his breath any longer and was forced to take a deep breath. Smoke came rushing into his lungs at that very moment. His lungs craved for oxygen, but got only ash instead. No amount of coughing bestowed him with any oxygen. Crap, I can't breathe. His head was spinning due to oxygen deprivation. His sight quickly grew dark. Felt like he was drowning. Vision blurred and turned black. Something assailed him from deep inside. It was the fear of death. Save me. Somebody. As Natsuhiko desperately pleaded, he heard a voice whispering into his ear.
ダメだよ、ヒコリ。
Yuri.
だから言ったでしょ。みんなで力を合わせなければこうなってしまうんだよ。もしやり直せるなら今度こそあの子を信じてあげて。
That voice soon faded away into the distance. Yuri, what are you? As soon as that question crossed his mind, his watch came into view. Were his eyes playing tricks on him? You could have sworn his watch had been broken, but now it appeared to be ticking away the time. The hour and minute hands looked blurry, but for some reason he could clearly make out the date. The date said 9/11. Let's see, that's the day Yuri said. She said, you need to cooperate with Sally or it'll become a life or death situation. It's too late. Natsuhiko's heart overflowed with regret. His consciousness sank into the darkness. Eventually, in the deep depths of his fading consciousness, "Wake," a voice called to him. Perhaps it was merely a memory of such a voice. And when he heard that voice, time returned to that day once more. Okay, we've already got this one. Lack of mutual trust with Salia. Now, this was an obvious red choice. So we're understanding a bit more about Salio. She's genuinely uneasy. At this point, if we put our senses high enough, we apologize for how we acted. Now, on the other hand, if we don't,
サリも大変なんだな。
we just accept it.
いや、別に大変というほどのことでもない。気遣い無用。
ああ、そう。
Perhaps she really didn't have that innocent charm after all. I guess that's just how she is. Marshall smirked as Natsuhiko reached that conclusion.
さて、誤解も解けたようだね。隠して新たな友情の始まりだね。
We didn't really, did we?
友情ね。
あれ、なんかいいタゲだね。
いや、別に。
only were that simple to form friendships.
ま、気になっていたことも解決したところで、そろそろ帰ろうか。
Three of them left the shopping center together. Alright, we'll skip ahead a bit and see if things change. Oh, things are already changing. After everything was eating, it was time for Mashito to go back home.
じゃあね、夏彦、サリュー、ユーリ、また明日。
Yeah, see you tomorrow. Sally was nice and quiet. So we're gonna have an abbreviated version of the normal scene which took place here. Mashiro left the house with those voices at her back.
それでは私も日課があるので部屋に戻る。
な、それじゃ。
Following Mashiro's departure, Sally also left the living room for her own room, leaving only Natsuhiko and Yuri behind.
なんか疲れたな。
Yuri smiled uncomfortably as Natsuhiko sighed.
疲れたってどうして？サルちゃんのことで？
やっぱり話し慣れない人と行動すると疲れちゃうよ。
そう。
Yep, we definitely never opened up and felt any sort of empathy for her.
せっかく同じ家に暮らす人同士仲良くできたらいいと思うけど。
わかるけど正直自信ないな。
Natsuhiko said this, Yuri.
それが現時点でのヒコリンの答え？
Yuri spoke with an oddly quiet tone of voice. Natsuhiko looked back at Yuri in shock. He found her staring back at him with a serious look on her face.
現時点での答えって。
今日一日サルちゃんと過ごしてヒコリンはあの子と仲良くなれそうにないって思ったの？
まあそういうことかな。
これからも変わりそうにない？
先のことはわからないけど相変わらずあまり合わないって印象が強いかな。
At Natsuhiko's words, Yuri gave a pitifully sad expression.
どうしてもそうなの？ヒコリンはサルちゃんを受け入れることはできないの？
Expression and tone of voice were different from the usual Yuri. Confused, Natsuhiko asked for clarification.
何を言っているんだ、ユーリ。
わからない。あの子は今ヒコリンを守るために戦っているっていうのに。
I guess the thing that really changes these earlier normalcy scenes for me is knowing now that this conversation is entirely one-sided, and Natsuhiko shutting people out and refusing to change is really unhealthy coping, so to speak. That's fair. The moment Yuri said that. Yep. Time to die. The sight of September 12th warped before Natsuhiko's eyes, and changed to the sight of September 16th. Why can't you trust others? Natsuhiko came to his senses. Where am I? Before his eyes were two rescue squad members collapsed on the floor, as well as Sally, the one who put him there. Natsuhiko and Mashito stared in shock at the current situation. Calm down, there's no time to space out. But Sally kicked down some rescue squad members. Natsuhiko was horribly confused. As he thought about the current situation, the conclusion he arrived at was, no way. Sally betrayed us! Oh boy! Natsuhiko's heart swelled with doubt. There wasn't even a hint at all these last few days that she'd do such a thing. But there's no other possibility, is there? The answer Natsuhiko arrived at only confused him all the more. He knew what had to be done. Oh no!
ユーリ、マシロ、逃げよう。
ヒコリン、どうして？
とにかくこの場から離れるんだ。
Natsuhiko grabbed Yuri and Mashito by the hand and ran. As they ran into the passageway, Mashito and Yuri shook their hands out of Natsuhiko's grip.
ちょっと待ってよ、夏彦。どうして逃げるの？
それもあの子を置いて。
だって仕方ないだろ。 レスキュー隊を蹴ったってことは彼女は味方じゃなかったってことだ。
それどういう意味？
サリュは僕らの味方のふりをしてたってことだろう。
Oof.
そうじゃなきゃ説明がつかないじゃないか。
冗談でしょ？サリはそんな風に見てたの？
Mashiro shouted as she pressed Natsuhiko.
そんなわけないじゃない。サリはいつだって私たちのために頑張ってくれたでしょ。2度目に超神経に行った時も廃工場に追い詰められた時も私たちのために戦ってくれたサリをどうして疑うのよ。
そりゃそうだけど、それだって全部嘘だったのかも。
夏彦、いい加減にして。またそうやって人を疑うの？私の時と同じに。そんな夏彦嫌いだよ。サリを信じてあげてよ。
Tears welled up in Mashiro's eyes. Natsuhiko looked away on reflex, his eyes happened to meet with Yuri's.
ヒコリン、それじゃダメだよ。
ダメって。
わからないの。あの夜にも言ったのに。
Yuri quietly looked at Natsuhiko's watch. Hmm? He could have sworn the watch had been broken, but before he realized it, its hands had begun to move once more. That wasn't the only thing odd about it. The display had moved to 9:12. That was the day they went out into the city with Salio.
どうして。
Yuri said something else without answering Natsuhiko's question.
ヒコリン、本当はサリュちゃんを信じたいはずでしょ。だから私はあの夜も。
Before she could finish her sentence, a dark figure appeared on the other side of the hallway. The dark figure held something in its hand, pointed it right at Natsuhiko. Dry sound roared. The left side of his chest was hit by an intense impact. Impact that seemed to only get stronger. Yuri and Mashiro's faces stiffened.
夏彦、
Mashiro pointed at Natsuhiko's chest. He fearfully looked down at it, to find a hole torn in his uniform, surrounded by a deep red stain. I got shot. The moment he realized that, it was too late. Strength rapidly left his body, and Natsuhiko collapsed on the spot.
夏彦、ヒコリン。
Mashiro and Yuri snapped their senses and ran over to him. I'm okay is what he tried to say. The blood pooling at the back of his throat prevented him from forming the words.
夏彦。
Mashiro broke into tears. On the other side of the hallway, the dark figure approached.
逃げろ。二人とも逃げろ。
Struggled to wring those words out. The dark figure aimed the gun at them and pulled the trigger. Mashiro voicelessly fell onto Natsuhiko. Warm fluid touched his face. Another gunshot. This time Yuri's face jerked back and she fell onto the floor. And finally, Natsuhiko felt something strike him in the head. His mind turned red. Eventually, in the deep depths of his fading consciousness, "Awake," a voice called to him. This was merely a memory of such a voice. And when he heard that voice, time returned to that day once more. Number 2, the Unreceptive's fate. Result of a lack of mutual trust with Salio. That's 1 and 2. Are trusting Salio. Raising favor towards Salio and setting her senses high. Simple enough. Bad endings are less complex in this game, but they also have a very different meaning than the bad endings in After. Namely, I'll go into more about that later. After is a more dynamic, dangerous situation that can go wrong. Before, these bad endings have a very intentional meaning, I think. This was an interesting discussion between Yuri and Natsuhiko. How he did something based on his own righteousness and initiative. He thought he was doing the right thing, but he only put Yuri into danger. Wrong for taking a kid to an unknown location. There's no way they could have known that something bad was going to happen that day, but Yuri's response: that's not growth, that's stagnation. Time has stopped for you. The one who stopped it was me. The Yuri in Natsuhiko's mind acknowledges that she's holding him back from living his life to his fullest potential. But alas.
きっとマシロンは今でも自分をすごく責めてる。
This is before we really start to trust Mashiro's instinct about this.
そのマシロンが危険な目に遭おうとしているのに無視するのがヒコリンなの。私を気遣うようにマシロンのことも気遣ってあげてよ。
そんな、それなりに気遣ってるつもりだよ。嘘じゃないよ。だけど
Just not at the same level as he does Yuri. It wasn't a question of if he liked Mashiro or hated her. Just that Yuri needed Natsuhiko, while Mashiro was a strong girl who could most likely fend for herself without him. Besides,
あいつが自分から危険に踏み込むならさすがに面倒は見きれないよ。どうして黙ってるんだよ。僕は間違ってるか？
間違ってるよ。
Yuri glared at him.
平穏の中でならそれでもいいよ。だけどそれはもう終わってるんだから。
え？
ヒコリン、もう一度よく考えて。今マシロンを気遣わなかったらきっと大変なことになる。
When Yuri said such. Natsuhiko's consciousness tore away from his recollection of September 13, returned to the reality of September 16. In reality, Natsuhiko was standing in front of a collapsed emergency staircase. Beside him was anxious Mashiro and a frightened Yuri, so we're only gonna snap at Mashiro now, I bet. They had gotten separated from Sally and were searching for an escape route. This is because here Mashiro apologizes for getting them into this. Natsuhiko's heart filled with regret. Regret of leaving Sally in the den of the enemy. Damn it, I can't do it. I really can't leave Sally all by herself. That resolution, Natsuhiko spoke to Yuri and Mashiro.
二人ともちょっとここで待っててくれ。
どうして？
僕はちょっとサリュのところに戻って彼女に加勢してくる。
ちょっと
Oh,
待
that's
って。
interesting.
それはやるべきことじゃないでしょ。
Oh. That's not what it is you need to do. Yuri flared up at Natsuhiko's words.
あの子はヒコリンに何て言ったの？マシロンを逃がすことがヒコリンの役目だって言ってたでしょ。
Yuri rarely ever yelled like that.
それに私たちじゃ足を引っ張るだけだとも言ってたよ。サリュの言う通り脱出経路を探さなきゃ。
Natsuhiko shook his head at Mashiro's words.
そうは言ってたけど今はサリュが心配なんだ。
でも
悪いけどここにいてくれ。すぐ戻る。
Natsuhiko ran off at that.
ヒコリン、待ってヒコリン。
Natsuhiko paid no heed as Yuri tried to stop him. And he traced back his steps, back to where they had split up with Sally. When he got there, the place was already empty.
サリは敵の連中はどこに行ったんだ。
Natsuhiko looked around. There was no one in sight. Instead, he saw something strange fallen over by the edge of the hallway. A strange cylindrical object with some sort of digital clock attached. That's a bomb! Oh fuck! Numbers on the clock counted down from 5, 4, 3. Wait, don't tell me that's...
時限爆弾。
So as Natsuhiko yelled that word, a flash of light shined before his eyes. Natsuhiko was blown away by an intense shock wave. Body flew through the air and slammed into a wall. He tumbled to the floor and eventually stopped. He seemed to have hit his head hard. His consciousness clouded over. His clothes were burning, perhaps due to the blast. Even when he tried to put out the flames, his body wouldn't move. Is this the end for me? He looked down at his body to check his injuries. His arm was soaked in blood. Even his broken watch was dyed red. Though the watch hands were thoroughly crushed, he could still clearly make out the date indicator. 9/13. Somehow he doubted that date. Huh. Was today September 13th? He felt off, but his head was too numb for him to think properly. And he heard a voice off somewhere in the distance.
光。
It was Yuri's voice. Did she come looking for me? Natsuhiko tried to lift his face, but he couldn't even do that. All he could do was listen to Yuri's hurried footsteps. A sorrowful voice rang out in his ears.
ごめんね、光。ごめんね。
Yuri seemed to be crying. What does she have to apologize for? Yuri answered Natsuhiko's doubts.
光をこんな目に遭わせて。
Huh? It's not your fault, is it, Yuri? Just ran off on my own, that's all.
でも私のせいなの。
ん？
ヒコリンにどうしても分かってもらいたいことがあって、そうしなければヒコリンはきっともっとひどいことになるから。
Natsuhiko didn't understand what Yuri was saying at all. Something he wanted me to understand. What?
ヒコリンの役目、マシロンを守るってこと。それはヒコリンのためにも。
That's all he heard before Yuri's voice faded into the distance. He could hear nothing else after that. The silent world, all he could hear was the sound of his own heartbeat. And that soon faded away. The only companion was utter silence. Eventually, in the deep depths of his fading consciousness, awake, a voice called to him. Perhaps it was merely a memory of such a voice. And when he heard that voice, time returned to that day once more. Number 3, the Apathetic's fate. The result of a lack of mutual trust with Mashiro. Very simple. Very effective. Before we go into our last ending, which might be before this, this is the 15th. I'm gonna go to the
ここはサリュの判断に従おう。超真剣に行くべきだ。
let's go to the PRC first.
でも大丈夫かな。おまわりさんたちの話じゃ、市内の重要施設は警察と保安課が固めてるって話だけど。
でも一刻も早くあの警備員をとっちめてやりたいだろ。な、サリュ。
同意。ことと次第によってはもう一度投げ飛ばす腹積もり。
Because we go there after the bomb goes off, so this might actually be the one, the source of the final bad ending.
それは余計にこじれそうな。
まあいい。とにかくタクシー拾って超真剣に行こう。
Not directly, but kids dashed out of the ruin factory. The PRC.
かしこまりました。音声入力目的地超心理学研究所ドライブモード自動通常走行開始。
Driver commanded the automatic driving system, and the taxi nimbly took off. Once they reached the PRC, the building's perimeter was dotted with police presence.
やっぱ警備固められてるね。
Mashita whispered to Natsuhiko so that the driver wouldn't hear.
保安課員もいるかもな。これじゃ中に入って警備員を同行するのは難しそうだな。
判断ミス。
仕方ない。先に先生のところに行こう。
He didn't know where Anna lived, but perhaps they could find her at school. She was such a diligent teacher that she might have still gone to work even though it was Sunday. That thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind. The driver spoke up.
お客さん、着きましたけど降りないんですか？
ああ、すみません、運転手さん。このまま学校に行ってください。
Okay, so we're just gonna...
もちろんいいですけど。
Confused, the driver started up the car once more. Okay, so we get railroaded into this choice anyways. Never mind. Okay, it's about 20 minutes later. Rushed inside, worried the security departments and surveillance cameras. This should be the last choice that leads us to a bad ending of sorts. It's essentially the first three bad endings were pretty much self-explanatory, but the fourth, the only guide I could find on that was a spreadsheet guide on a Reddit thread, which essentially says that this requires a full playthrough of specific choices to sort of max out your values enough to get through the first three bad endings, but min them enough so that you are still doubting this investigation thing. However, Yuri did not answer. She in her room. The only phone at home was in the living room, so if she were in her room, it would be understandable that she might not be able to hear the phone ring. Natsuhiko waited patiently, and eventually the phone connected.
ああ、ユーリか？そっち大丈夫か？あの後、保安課の連中が来たりしてないか？
心配しないで。何もなかったよ。
Natsuhiko felt relieved to hear Yuri's relaxed voice.
ヒコリンたちこそ、あの後大丈夫だった？
なあ、こっちは問題ない。真白もサリも捕まったりはしてないよ。
今、どこにいるの？
Like some of the lower value choices on this day are essentially not apologizing to Mashiro. Like, he even thinks under his breath this is bullshit. Mashiro's still angry about this, which she'll no doubt be able to hear as well. We don't bond with Salyu deeply over our shared inability to understand the world properly. And we didn't really bond in the karaoke thing.
街のどこかだよ。まあ心配することはないけどさ、ちょっと今日は帰れそうにないんだ。真っ白とサリと一緒に公園かどこかに野宿しようと思う。
That was the lie. Small diversion in the off chance that the phone was actually tapped. It's just weird that since there's no way that's actually going to get out, we're just talking into a phone right now.
公園？野宿ってこと？女の子2人も連れて大丈夫なの？
Not connected to anything.
いや、真っ白はあれでなかなか肝の据わったやつだし、サリもああ見えてワイルドな子なんだよ。ほんとほんと。昼間も警備員を投げ飛ばしたりしてたしさ。
ならいいんだけど、あんまり無茶はしないでね。
Natsuko smiled wryly at Yuri's words.
送り出しておいてなんだけど、やっぱり後からだんだん心配になっちゃってね。
そうか。
Though he felt somewhat regretful, Natsuhiko continued.
それにしても、ユーリが僕を送り出したのは少し意外だったよ。ユーリは僕以上に事件とか危険とかそういうのが嫌いだと思ってたからさ。なんで今回に限ってあんなこと言ったんだい？どういう？
Response to that casual question.
ヒコリンが
Yuri responded softly and ominously.
実は前からずっと思ってたことがあってね。ヒコリンはさ、本当に今までみたいな穏やかな生活が好きなの。私に合わせてただけなんじゃない？
Natsuhiko gulped to hear what she was insinuating.
そんなことはないよ。僕自身が本当に穏やかな生活が好きなだけさ。
それじゃあ今回みたいに平穏が崩れるようなことがあったらやっぱり嫌。
Natsuhiko thought for a second before answering.
そりゃあね。でも仕方ないよ。巻き込まれてしまったものは。
Several things stood out to him in the moment he gave that answer. I think things would have turned out like this if Mashito hadn't stuck her nose in weird places. Yep, we're... okay. Now we're in it. No, I guess Sally's the bigger problem compared to Mashito. Yep, he still doubts his friends. Now we're in bad endingville. Just had to go and throw that security guard to the ground like that. Yuri fell silent as Natsuhiko pondered.
あれどうしたユーリ。
Natsuhiko spoke up after Yuri had remained silent for a while.
ヒコリン、そんなんじゃダメだよ。
え
どうして二人を責めるの？マシロもサルちゃんも一生懸命自分のすべきことをしただけじゃない。
Natsuhiko was shocked to hear that.
ちょっと待ってくれユーリ。僕は何も言ってないぞ。
ヒコリンは二人を責めているでしょ。
どうしてわかる？
わかるよ。だって。
Right as Yuri was about to say something, the connection suddenly cut.
あれもしもしもし
Natsuhiko desperately shouted at the receiver. There was no answer. What the world was that supposed to mean? When that thought crossed Natsuhiko's mind, the scenery around him vanished as if it were an illusion. Here we go. Essentially, if we somehow get to this point where we're in it, and we still don't believe in our friends, this is what happens. Before he knew it, Natsuhiko was in Labo. Yuri and Machito were at his side. The sight of Machito shedding tears jogged Natsuhiko's memory about the present situation. Oh yeah, right now. They were surrounded on both sides by flames on their way from Area 4 to Area 5. The end of the passageway was covered in fire. Even if they turned around and went back to Area 4, there were fires blazing there too. They were caught between a fire and a hot place. God, what do we do? We had to come up with a plan. Time kept ticking down.
ヒコリン、
Yuri tugged at Natsuhiko's sleeves and pleaded anxiously.
このままここにいたら大変なことになる。
いや待てユーリ。行くことも戻ることもできない。だったらここで救助を待とう。
救助ってそんなの来るの？
Yuri's tone was negative. Natsuhiko couldn't think. Time ticked by all the more. Natsuhiko looked at his watch, although it was supposed to be broken. It suddenly started ticking down time again. The date was off as it displayed 9:14. Natsuhiko was perturbed by the sight. I thought I'd overcome the past that day. In the end, did I overcome nothing at all? Yep. Eventually, smoke drifted in from the other side of the passageway. Mashito muttered soon enough.
ねえ夏彦、
え
正直やばいっぽいね。
As Natsuhiko sunk into that silence, the expression on his face must have been one of extreme depression. Mashito gently took his hand.
最後になるかもしれないから言っておきたいことがあるんだ。
え
一昨日のこと。
Day before yesterday?
夏彦はさ、私を信じて一緒にテロリストを探してくれたよね。 ずっと私エンパシー使えないって嘘ついてたのに許してくれたよね。
ああ、
本当に嬉しかったよ。ありがとう、夏彦。
Natsuko felt his heart twist at those words. Mashita spoke those words as if they were her last. Natsuko squeezed Mashita's hand back. More and more smoke filled the passageway. The ambient temperature rose. Eventually, Yuri muttered sorrowfully.
ヒコリン、こんな終わり方嫌だよね。ヒコリンなら正しい道を探せると思ったのに、アシロンたちと手を取り合って現実を乗り越えられると思ったのに。
ごめん。
Natsuko held Yuri's hand too. Three of them stood there, hand in hand. Who knew how long? Eventually they spotted fire at the other side of the passageway. The fire drew closer. The fire drew closer. The fire drew closer. Natsuko grasped Yuri's and Mashito's hands tightly and watched the fire flicker. Eventually, in the deep depths of his fading consciousness, awake, a voice called to him. This was merely a memory of such a voice. And when he heard that voice, time returned to that day once more. Scapegoater's fate. Result of low trust in Mashito and Celio. For this fate by raising them favor toward leading up to this point, just overall. You had to go out of your way to try and get this. Okay. And that is it. That took longer than expected. It took way longer than expected, but we're here. Got the last of those endings. It's time to say goodbye to before. Next time on Route Double, we dive into the current route. Until then. Oh right, I was gonna say what I thought about. Yeah, the bad endings on this route, much more representative of Natsuhiko's mental roadblocks than anything. I'd say it's a bit of a interesting writing. In that they tried to relate each of these to each of the physical roadblocks in the game to a mental roadblock of some sort. And it worked for the most part. I think. Very much in the vein of, if Natsuhiko hadn't grown in this way, here's how he might have reacted differently. I think the weakest one is probably the you remember you have to protect Mashiro. When the burden of that route was... Okay, I can see the last discussion of that day was being... No, I have to protect Yuri first and foremost. Mashiro's strong, she can take care of herself. And so you go back to the present with that mindset. Mashiro's strong, she can take care of herself. You go back to save Sally and get blown up by a time bomb. Okay, I just talked myself back into liking that. Back into appreciating that one. So, first time, we don't really trust Salyu, so we can't open the literal physical roadblock and we die in a fire. That's probably the weakest one, the first one. Because the second one also involved trusting Salyu on a deeper level, opening up and accepting her and apologizing for our own roadblock in our mind. If we don't do that, we panic when Salyu tosses some rescue workers randomly and run off and get shot to death by Watase. Similar concept, but stronger based on the action that prompted it. First one is literally just a door. Third one works pretty well in terms of integrating the change the growth that you need to take away from that day. Fourth one, you have to go out of your way to get, but it is very much the we made it this far, but fuck, I didn't change as much as I thought I did. But guess I'll die. It is interesting. That's the final mental roadblock you gotta overcome. You thought you overcame your past and regained your adventurous, justice-seeking self, but you didn't. You just doubted and blamed. You doubted, disagreed, blamed, didn't trust. And now you're stuck between a fire and a hot place, and you'll die. That is all. That's all for our bad ending discussion. Thank you again for watching, and take care.